EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to the JAKIB postgame show. An unbelievable game, a wild game with turnovers, with bad decisions, with injuries, with a boatload of yards, and a couple clutch performances that results in a Philadelphia Eagles win. Eagles win 15-12 in New Orleans. That's Dan Sileo, host of the National Football Show, a Miami Hurricanes legend and a 1987 national champion. We'll be joined in a couple moments here by John McMullen, getting ready to getting set up on his computer now. Big Sills, what an unbelievable game. Eagles walk out of here with a win. Pretty wild, man, that game. Back and forth, yards, interceptions, turnovers, you got everything in that game, but the Eagles walk out of it with a win. What's your first takeaways after watching that game?
And poor coaching decisions once again by Nick Sirianni, the head football coach. Decision makings all over that place were just absolutely a hallmark of that game. Eagles should have won that game by 15 points. I mean, at the end of the day, give it to the defense. They totally showed up today. Secondary-wise, stopping the run, they really had the best game of the year so far. That was a really nice performance. And again, pressure, they started pressuring Carr a little more. I thought that the center going out was going to be a benefit. I didn't really appreciate the immaturity at the end of the game by Jalen Carter. I know Jalen Carter's probably releasing frustration, and Zander just said something to me too. He's like, hey, listen, you probably talked a lot of crap. No question about it. I get it. And for Sirianni and Big Dom and those guys to make an issue of that after the game, he kind of threw gasoline on that. So, I mean, it was really a chaotic football game for the Eagles. I mean, the Jalen Hurts numbers are going to be misleading. He was awful in the pocket. He still rolls right. He holds the ball too long. I mean, at the end of the day, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, and the Eagle defense won that football game, in my opinion. And get this, too. You got to remember something here, Zander, in the NFL. This is not a beauty pageant. You're not being evaluated or graded on how it looks. You're now sitting at 2-1. You get away with it without A.J. Brown being on the field. You have to walk and get on that airplane and go, we're 2-1, and now we got the Buccaneers on the other side of this. A lot of work to be done, but a lot of question marks heading out of that game. But the defense did show up. The offense, you know, they lose people in the O-line. Lane Johnson is a miss. Obviously, Micaiah Becton hurting his arm. For all in all, Zander, I mean, they hung in there. And they gutted that win out.
You know what, Big Sills, I'm going to push back on you on one. I'm going to push back on you on one thing with Jalen Hurts. And I know the stats might be a little misleading, but I called on him all week to rise up, to be the elite quarterback, to win the game when A.J. Brown's out. They needed 69 yards, and they had a minute and 50 seconds to do it. They had no Lane Johnson. They had no A.J. Brown. They had no Devontae Smith. And they had Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert. Now, granted, 60-yard gain by Dallas Goedert, obviously huge. Jalen Hurts marched right down that football field, and they won the game. I'm giving him a ton of credit for the win today. I thought he was great, other than the 2 turnovers, which you can be critical of. At the end of the day, he rose up. He was 29 of 38, looks like, for 311 yards for Jalen Hurts. He had the 1 interception. Saquon Barkley, 17 carries, 147 yards. Dallas Goedert, 10 receptions for 170 yards. Let's bring in our man, John McMullen. I'll get his key takeaways on this matchup here. Johnny Mac, welcome to the post-game show, brother. An unbelievable game, John. My open was a wild game with turnovers, with this bad decisions, with injuries, with a couple clutch performances and a boatload of yards. And the Eagles walk out of New Orleans at 2-1. Johnny Mac, your first takeaways on this win.
Yeah, pretty amazing win. I think we all had it going that way, did we? Forever, this is, to me, will be coined the Dallas Goedert game. I mean, it looked like all was lost. I think it was 3rd and 16, maybe, somewhere when they get the 61-yard route. Nice little concept. Jahan Dotson deserves some credit, finally contributing with that route. A couple Saints defenders run into each other. All of a sudden, he goes 61 yards. I feel bad for Zander. He's got to give away a jersey every week.
Don't feel bad about
65-yard
me,
run.
Johnny Heck. I just said it in the chat. We'll be giving away another Saquon jersey. So get your membership.
65-yard run, home run, man.
Home
I'll
run.
tell you, those home runs help. And I'll tell you what as well. Watch that play when you get a chance. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, phenomenal, just clearing things out, and then Saquon did the rest. The home run, 65 yards. And then the defense. I mean, the defense is the story of the day. All anybody talked about was the New Orleans offense. I told you guys in the pregame show, I just had a hunch. Derek Carr's Derek Carr. He's not going to play consistently from week to week to week. Not good. I think the Eric McCoy injury hurt them really, and that happened early in the game, but still. And the throw at the end of the game, give Reed Blankenship a ton. That is a difficult catch to keep that football off the turf. And he got it. Very similar to the Green Bay game, where he did the same thing. He remains the most underrated player on the Eagles. Great game by Jalen Carter. He's got to calm down at the end of the game, though. He was tremendous, even though you don't see the sacks. He dominated the game from the get-go. Zach Bond, up, down, back up in his return to New Orleans.
Yep.
He was all over the field.
Jordan Davis, too.
And they gave up. Jordan Davis had a great game. Brandon Graham closing it out with the big pass rush that forced
he was
Derek Carr to make that.
Brandon Graham.
Yeah, he always is. People, all they talk about is age. I said, look at the film. The guy can play. The guy can still play. 219 yards total offense for the New Orleans Saints. I would have bet the over if he gave me 219. I would have bet everything I've ever owned. Forget about what I own. Everything I've ever owned.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
They hold this team to 219 yards.
Yeah, the team stats are unbelievable. 460 total yards for the Eagles, as you mentioned, to 219 for the Saints. Jalen Hurts, I thought, John, we talked about it at halftime. The turnovers were concerning. But look, I thought he turned it around. I thought he had a good second half. He played sound football. They marched the game, marched right down the field, with 157. I'm looking, when they went down 5, and I'm like, okay, you got 157. Now you got all 3 timeouts. You got no Lane Johnson. You got no A.J. Brown. You got no Devontae Smith. I'm like, you're throwing to Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson, trying to get a win in this game. And they marched right down. Dallas Goedert. But, still unbelievable.
And Jahan Dotson. Yeah, it was ugly. And you're like, what?
I got you, John.
Yeah, and Dallas, seemed a little bit disappointed before this week. And, I mentioned they couldn't game plan. They couldn't adjust the game plan without A.J. Brown last week. This week they could, and I said they better get Dallas Goedert involved. Well, they did in a big way. 10 receptions, 11 targets, 170 yards, and the big 61-yarder that set up the game-winning touchdown. Yeah, great performance. Overcame a lot. You mentioned the injuries. That's going to be a concern. But from all indications, Devontae Smith had a little bit of a pep in his step at the end of the game, and
that was a cheap play. I don't know.
You never know. Well, that was the defensive lineman coming back. He was getting pushed back, and he's just hustling. It wasn't a cheap shot from a hit standpoint. He got him in the back, but it was such a devastating, you think about the size difference from that perspective. So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. I don't think it was a cheap shot, but it was just one of those things. And DeMonte's a tough guy. He'll be able to come back. Lane with the concussion. You never know how long these things are going to take. Sometimes they're quick. Sometimes they're not. Lane has more of a history of concussions, so that's probably a little bit more of a concern. They lost Mekhi Becton. I mean, I thought Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson did a really good job coming in game. Just a really solid. Now, you'd love to clean up some of those turnovers. I know people are going to harp on Nick Sirianni's aggression. I say, hey, welcome to Nick Sirianni. That's what he's going to do, good, bad, or indifferent. But defensively, you got to give Vic Fangio and his defense a lot of credit because they didn't look like they had any life whatsoever. This league is crazy. I mean, Denver goes into Tampa Bay. We're all talking about Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield this and Baker Mayfield that. Denver beats them 26-7 on the road. You never know in this league.
Yep, no doubt.
Another example, everybody talking about the New Orleans offense, and other than Chris Olave, and the Eagles did a really good job on Alvin Kamara, and he's a great player, but he had 87 yards rushing on 26 carries, so 3.3 yards per carry. And that's because the Eagles' defensive front was all over him. And Carr was brutal. And that's a testament to the Eagles.
No
Sam,
doubt.
Remember what you said? You asked at the end of the pregame show, you said, keys to the game. It was Barkley and Goddard the whole time. Now, it became more accentuated with the injury to Devontae Smith because they had to. But it really showed a little bit of vulnerability that the Saints defense had up the seam and up the hash marks in that game because Dallas Goedert, and by the way, the mismatches that they had on him, covering him, they couldn't cover him all day. Like you said, 10 catches, John, for 170.
No.
He was an absolute. And by the way, that pass, Zander, that you said, he marched the team. I'll tell you what he did do. He put players in position to make plays that are big-time players. That's play calling also by Kellen Moore, getting it to Goddard, getting it to Barkley. Those two guys were so great in that football game. And as you said, for Jalen, I thought he held on to the ball too long. He's still rolling right. He struggles a little bit, like you said, in the first 2 quarters and maybe even in the first 3 quarters. But he battled, and he came back in the fourth quarter.
He keeps coming, Big Sales. He keeps coming.
He does. And that's the one thing John says, too.
Yeah.
That he's a 60-minute guy, whether he's playing C+, A+.
Relentless. He's relentless.
He's going to be relentless and sticking to it. But, and again, once again, like you said, Zander, you got 20 games. In the last 20 games, he's got 26 turnovers. And he's still winning ball games, which is incredible. It's insane.
Oh, listen, Big Sales, you just said the 2 guys, though. You just said the 2 guys. And here's the stats for everybody. Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert today combined. 34 touches, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 65-yard touchdown run, obviously, for Saquon, a 61-yard catch to set up the game winner, a 2-point conversion. No AJ, no Smitty, no Becton or Lane. Those dudes took over the game today. No doubt. It was an unbelievable performance by both of those 2 players. I'm going to remind everybody in the chat, we will be giving away our second Saquon Barkley jersey. The link is pinned at the top. Become a member today. We'll be doing that on Birds 365 later in the week, maybe Monday or Tuesday. So look out for that. Guys, next topic I want to get to, and Dan, I'm going to start with you on this one, is Nick Sirianni, right? A lot of flack today he got. I'm going to get to all super chats, by the way, later in the show, but this one is about Nick Sirianni. Terry, thank you for your support. Terry says, definitely got to get rid of the head coach. You almost ruined the game. You win that game in a tight one. Nick made some costly decisions, though, in that game that are going to be under the microscope all week long. Dan, I'm going to go to you first on this. What's your thoughts on Nick Sirianni coming out of that game and some of the decisions he made in the football game?
Okay, I'll do it again. Decision-making by the head coach, again, it's been spotty since the beginning of the year. I mean, here's what you got to look at with him. Do you agree that you're going on the road for a second week in a row without your best player on the football team? Then you lose your second or third best player, Devontae Smith. Then you lose half your offensive line. Points are a premium. You have got to take points on the road in a place like that where there's not a lot of points being scored. Look, like John says, welcome to, or you say it too, Zander, welcome to the world of Nick Sirianni at being aggressive. He wasn't very good even on the 4th downs. That's not the same tush-push team without Jason Kelce. They are not. They're not the same team. And with the quarterback not having all of his weapons out there, I'm taking the for sure opportunity at getting my points. Take the points. You're on the road, as I said, hostile environment. The other team's not playing great. Your defense is playing lights out. I mean, we thought at times this thing was going to be an over 55-point game. You thought points were going to be put up, and all of a sudden there weren't any points. Defense showed up. I mean, I don't know. Some of the decision at the end of the football game, the way that he was involved in those decisions going into the half and into the end of the ball game, I don't know, John. I mean, I completely disagree with people that when you look at his game management, this was something Andy Reid struggled with in Philly, was game management. This guy's not he's not adverse not to criticism as well.
I don't think fourth downs are about game management as much as from the perspective you're talking about Andy and this. And by the way, I mean, Andy might be the greatest coach of all time at this point. He's easily top 10. You can make a very strong argument he's top 5. And you still got people in this town that say he's terrible at game management. Well, he's done pretty well with his terrible ability to manage games. What does fourth down have to do with game management? I mean, and you look at particularly, they were 1 for 3, right? They're 1 for 3, and the 2 they missed. And Greg Olson did a great job on the broadcast explaining one of them. Dallas Goedert's wide open, and Jahan Dotson's not getting not getting out of the way as the decoy, and Jalen Hurts has got to eat the ball. So that's a good play call by, similar to last week with Saquon dropping the football. That's a good play call by Kellen Moore. It's going to succeed. Lack of execution, in this case by Jahan Dotson. Going away from the tush push and getting a little bit too cute to Saquon Barkley. I thought that was a mistake, not only from the standpoint of getting too cute, but also, what are you going to do at that late juncture? You only got 1 or 2 more plays. So I would have taken the field goal there. But these are not egregious mistakes. The one, and again, Zander knows what I'm going to say here. People don't judge play calls. They judge play results. When they go for it in fourth down against Green Bay, everybody loves it. When they don't get it, everybody hates it. It's understandable human nature. But you got a play dialed up, it's going to work, and Jahan Dotson does the wrong route, is in the way. All right, maybe still learning the offense. Maybe from that perspective, you want to blame the coaching staff, blame them for that. They should know maybe he's not ready for this. And then you say, go in a different direction. I can't play this game of, it didn't work. That's a bad decision.
Why would you dial up a play for a guy that's not ready then? That's decision making, John. If you're
they didn't dial up the play. They dialed up the play for the play for the guy who caught 10 passes for 170 yards. The other guy got in the way. They didn't dial up the play for Jahan Dotson.
Okay,
he didn't do a simple job of being a
There's
decoy.
nobody on the planet who would think that was a well thought out decisional making football game by the head coach. No one in their right mind would think that. Nobody would.
Yeah, but I don't think people think about it the right way. Again, Zander, I've talked to Zander about this. You could go on Google. I encourage everybody. I say Google just in life how to make good decisions. First thing you're going to read: good decision doesn't guarantee good outcome. Everybody thinks it does. It doesn't. Think about your own life. Everybody. You make good decisions. Sometimes you get a bad outcome because guess what? Life gets messy. Things get in the way. In the case of pro football, execution gets in the way. That was the third down, so it's not a fourth down. But a third down call last week, anybody who wants to say that was a bad play call doesn't understand what they're looking at. The guy's wide open to your best player. It's a 1-yard pass, an extension of the running game. You drop the football. That's not bad. That's a lack of execution. That's not a bad decision. There's 2 different things. In the case of Dotson, bad execution. In the case of getting too cute on the tush push, that's probably a bad decision, or more so. But you can make the argument if it's executed. I got to look at the play. I got to see how it was blocked. It's very difficult to make these judgments right away. It didn't look like he had much room. So, they probably got too cute. But as teams get more into this tush push, and I've said this pretty consistently with the tush push, I'd go completely away from it because now everybody's hyper focused on stopping it. I'd spread the field and let Jalen Hurts do a conventional quarterback sneak. I think that would be more effective at this stage. And these are all things the coaching staff should be discussing. But yeah, I can't say a bad outcome is necessarily a bad decision. The Eagles have been the forefront, and forget about Nick Sirianni. This goes back to Doug Peterson. They've been at the forefront of this league when it comes to aggression, and it has served them well. So to all of a sudden show up on one particular Sunday and say, you shouldn't do that anymore, I don't agree with that. I don't.
Yeah, I think there's been a blanket of analytics though that are over every decision, and it's like, if the analytics say do it, that's what we're going to do every time. Every game has a different feel, different moment, a different. I mean, the end of the half. The end of the half is the best example though. Everybody retweets the thing. Oh, they say to take the field. I don't need analytics to tell me you should take a field goal when you're down 3-0 in a game where points are hard to come by. Take the damn field goal. There's 14 seconds on the clock.
On the road.
I think we're overthinking some of these decisions, and I think that's where Big Sills is coming
from.
Well,
on the fourth and 4, the analytics said take the field goal. They didn't. They don't listen just to the analytics. That's the point. They're aggressive. They're aggressive by nature because they think aggression over the long haul serves you well. They've already proven that's the case. Unfortunately, some other teams like Detroit have caught up, and they don't have as big as an advantage with that as they typically have had in the past. And maybe they should adjust because they used to have a huge advantage. It's become much lesser. But Dan Campbell dealt with the same thing. I say it all the time. The Lions were in position to execute to win an NFC championship game. Players didn't execute. Dan Campbell got killed for fourth down decisions. He got him there with aggression, and people want to say, oh, but you lost. You shouldn't have been aggressive. It's the reason why I was in the stinking game. That's why I kind of look at things a little bit differently.
Fair enough. Sills, last point, just because I want to move into this defense and continue to recap the game. I don't want to get stuck on Nick, but just any follow-up to why you think it was such a poorly executed.
Listen, again, he's in position. He's in a different position now. He's got nothing to do pretty much with the design of the plays any longer. He's more involved in decision-making when it comes to what play what John's talking about. Run the ball, throw a flare pass, go with the analytics. That's his job. And I cannot sit here and say that guy's done a good job in 3 games running the direction of the offense and running the direction of the football team. I won't. I think he's been inconsistent for the 3 weeks. Whether, again, and by the way, let's do this. This is not just one game. I'm talking about the collection of the 3 because that's a trend.
It's been very consistent.
When you see the trend of kind of,
it's been very. I would argue
mistakes.
I would argue it's been very consistent.
Yeah, of being inconsistent for sure.
He's aggressive. That's the consistency.
Okay,
but that's not inconsistent execution.
Well, that's not either. You're going with the analytics, John.
Decision making is pretty consistent.
Okay, so if you're aggressive, but you're using
not going
analytics,
with the. I just explained it.
Okay. I don't see the game. You're right.
How are you using analytics?
No, you're right. I don't.
How do you? So next gen stats say the analytics say take the field goal. They go the opposite way, and they're still going by the analytics.
So, John, you think they use applied analytics?
I don't get
putting a game plan together. You think that? You think they when they use the analytics, it's applied analytics. You think that that's what they do when they're making those decisions, especially down in the red zone? Or do you think they're doing it with gut, or do you think they're doing it with game flow?
Nick went on literally a 7-minute explanation last week. I encourage everybody to read it, find the transcript. They do studies on this kind of stuff all the time. And they lean on those particular studies that Nick Sirianni does, to the point where people were saying last week he dismissed the analytics, and Jeffrey Lurie's going to get upset by that because Jeffrey's very analytically driven. So the point, there were some people saying, oh boy, because Nick actually said anybody can go online and punch a bunch of numbers into 20 different websites and it tells you what to do. He doesn't do that. And some people thought, oh, you better watch it. Jeffrey believes in analytics, believes in aggression for the reason I just explained. I think he's got a better handle on why it's done, and why they do it. And by the way, they're 2-1, and they're a drop pass away from being 3-0. Has it been ugly? Sure, it's been ugly. But as typically, they're finding ways to win games. And one of the reasons why we talk about this being a 60-minute football team, because you can get fired up about stopping a fourth down here. You can get fired up about stopping a fourth down there, and they're going to be back and doing it again. And simple math, you don't need analytics to say, any team, one of the problems about the end of the game, when you're in a desperation situation as a defense trying to stop an offense, say an offense, any offense around the NFL, gets the football with 1:30 left, no timeouts, and they're down 4 points, you have to stop 4 plays, not 3 plays, all times. 10 yards, 4 plays. That ain't easy. So when you constantly put that stress on the opposing defense, you can say, and again, this is proven over dating back to Doug Peterson long before Nick Sirianni. This is proven to be a successful way of doing business for the Philadelphia Eagles. Should they change? You can make the argument, but it's revisionist history to say it hasn't worked for them.
My only problem, Sills, real quick, just because my only problem.
How about what I'll agree with one thing John says here. You're winning ball games like this early. This is something that you build on, because you walk in, and I tried explaining this to people on our show by telling them, hey, if you're winning ugly now and your football team is playing C- football or C football, that's where you want to be if you're 2-1. Like John said, I don't want to be playing my best football and winning close games like that where there's not a lot of room to grow. Eagles are probably playing C football right now, okay? Look at the room to grow that they have by the end of the year. You're 2-1, like you said. You go on the road, and you've won against 2 opponents that are NFC potential playoff teams that you may face down the road, especially since down in the NFC South, Tampa got beat, like John said, and now you got everybody bunched up down there in that division. So you may see this team, again, like they saw Tampa last year, early in the year, not a good team. Then they saw Tampa in the playoffs, and Tampa was a completely different team. They were the opposite of the Eagles of a year ago. So you get out of a game like this with all the injuries they have. By the way, since I've been covering the team, John, for 4 years, we're looking at a collection of injuries now that, as great as 22 was, boy, I'll tell you what, you head into week 4 here with the Buccaneers, man, you got a mass unit now that you're going to have to put together here a little bit when you go play Tampa, because they're going to be a hungry football team too. John, you said this. I believe you talked about the war of attrition. This is right here what we're talking about with the war of attrition here. So, again, you get the win here. There's no question about it. But I'll ask you, Zander, are you ready to still put that team in a position where you would call them a Super Bowl contender?
I mean, not yet. I want to move on.
Not yet.
I want to get to the defense.
With a chance, too.
I get it. Let me move on here. I want to move to the defense. I just want to give my last point here on Sirianni, because I understand what both you are saying. I don't like approaching any decision in a vacuum, whether it's under the guise of analytics or under the guise of aggression. I believe there should be some critical decision making based on any given scenario. And I think that's why people are upset with Nick. There doesn't seem to be any of that. And John, you pointed it out. It's aggression. It's aggression all the time, no matter what's going on. And I think there should be more thought process that goes into it. So that would be my one pushback on Nick. I do want to move on to Jalen Carter, though, and that defense.
Well, he mixes it in.
Go ahead, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I mean, he went on 4th and 4 early last week, and he didn't go for 4th and whatever 3 or 4. And people are saying it's not. It does differ. He decided to give Jake Elliott a chance to kick a 60-yard field goal, which didn't work out. It's not the same, but people only see the failures, and they forget about the successes because everything's great. They only see the failure, which I get it. Nick gets it. That's the life of a head coach, but it doesn't make it right. is all I'm trying to say.
Understood. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. I thought they were tremendous today. Only give up 12 points in a 15-12 win. I want to start with one guy, though, everybody, and that's Jalen Carter. We were hard on him all week after not showing up through the first 2 weeks of the year. He's the catalyst on this defense, and boy, was he a force to be reckoned with today. I'll also give a shout-out to Jordan Davis, who got a sack today. I thought he was much better today. Sills, I'm going to go to you with you. Former defensive tackle, a national champion defensive tackle on that 1987 Miami Hurricanes team, a starter on that football team. What did you see from the Eagles DTs today, namely Jalen Carter?
Outstanding. For as poorly as they played in the last game and not as great in their Packer game, there was a play in the middle there with Jalen Carter that was just a technique play. Engaged, wiped, tackled, and he tackled him for a TFL. I mean, there was so much technique, and maybe this goes back again to what Vic said earlier in the week when he had his last press conference. It's my job that we've got to go in there and teach technique. And there was. He had a sensational ball game and controlled the middle. John was right. When the Saints lost, I believe on the third or fourth play of the game, they lost their center. They had to start having a makeshift offensive line. The Eagles were able to adapt better with what they did with their guys and Steen and Johnson than what I thought the Saints were able to do. I still thought Alvin Kamara got positive yards, and I still thought they broke down the edges. But, dude, if I had to look at guys in that front seven, there's no question the two tackles, Brandon Graham, once again, still showing up. MIA, SOS, the guy belongs on the Titanic. That guy, Bryce Huff, I don't even know if he played today. I didn't see Nolan Smith, but the guys who really did show up out there in that football game.
He was near the final play. I had to double check.
Hey, John, I'll tell you too, a couple times the Kobe Dean got beaten coverage, but once again, you know what he's doing? He's coming along. He's not playing great, but he's not killing you. Okay? He's not.
I think he's been great in tackling, dude. I think he's wrapped up people well. For being an undersized linebacker,
I'm not right, but in coverage, that's why I'm
dude.
saying in coverage, he's getting spun around. But in tackling, he's kind of there, and he's getting better in his pursuit angles. I thought he played well. I thought they picked on Mitchell a little bit, as much as Carr could get to. But, John, I thought the big part of that game was that they got the internal pressure on Carr up the middle. He couldn't step up in the pocket, and he couldn't elevate the pocket because he couldn't look downfield because of the interior pressure.
Yeah, and I think it started early with Jalen Carter. And Jalen, look, he called his own performance trash during the week, and he showed up and he had a fire lit under him, and he played well. Brandon Graham late in the game, he played well. You mentioned Jordan Davis, Zach Bond. You know, you talk about linebackers and coverage. He got beat by Alvin Kamara down the sideline once. No, linebackers can't cover. That's another one of my pet peeves. And everybody, hey, we got to need a linebacker that covers. Fine, yeah, all right, go find. That's not named Fred Warner. Go find one. That's why you try to get him in space. And as long as you can do the other stuff. So I thought, but today I thought it was about Jalen Carter. Brandon Graham on that fourth down stop of New Orleans took on two blockers and basically pushed one of them into Kamara. And even the second effort, excuse me, came up a little bit short because of Brandon Graham. And I'm losing my voice, but he was tremendous at 36 years old. Brandon Graham, can't say enough about him. He set the edge. He set the tone coming off that bad week. I don't even get, like I said in the pregame show, guys, I don't even care about Bryce Huff in the run game anymore. As long as Brandon's healthy, use him. Use him.
Yeah.
I
just thought the whole defense, they played. You know what it looked like too, John? It looked like there was an energy. It looked like a sense of urgency. I mean, you said it, and you called it right. I don't believe the Saints are going to show up today. Well, I think a lot of that had to do with the aggressiveness of what the Eagle defense. I think the Eagle defense punched them in the mouth, and I think New Orleans was kind of shocked because they had been looking at the tape. They had been watching the tape, And let's face it then, if you put a performance like that out against New Orleans Saints, you clearly can say this about the Eagles. They've underachieved, which is actually a good thing instead of saying, well, they have suck-ass talent. Now they just got to elevate their talent week in and week out and play like that. You elevate your talent and play like that week in and week out with high energy, you're going to get blocked in this league. I don't care if you're Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, or you're Myles Garrett. You're going to get blocked in this league. But if you maintain the energy level that you had, like you played with today, I thought the secondary played with energy, kept everything underneath. That was, in my opinion, like John said, it was the Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, and the defense show. That's what won that football game in a very, very tough place. On the road, you get to win, and you're now 2-1 heading to Tampa. And who knows what's next in store.
Yeah, no doubt. Big win there for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to get our first.
Yeah, I don't like it's yeah.
Go ahead, John, you're a little delayed, so I think that's why you're cutting it. That's all right. Go ahead.
I evidently, yeah, I'm on a little bit of a lag, so I apologize. I don't know what's going on, but from the standpoint of what they did defensively, about the only thing New Orleans had was Chris Olave. The Eagles could not do anything with Chris Olave. He's one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. 6 targets, 6 completions, 86 yards, the touchdown. They went right to him after Darius Slay. By the way, that's an injury I didn't mention. Very concerned about Slay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that penalty.
They went right after Ringo. But the point about Derek Carr, if you speed him up, he's not that good. And the Eagles were able to speed him up. There weren't a lot of sacks, only one by Jordan Davis. Bunch of hurries by Jalen Carter. Big hurry late by Brandon Graham. But they sped him up. And he's not very good when you speed him up. And the few times they didn't, he had big throws to Olave or the one to Kamara I mentioned against Zach Bond, but very little. And I'll be very, because Tampa lost 26-7. So got to learn. This is a week-to-week league. I don't like that score from the Eagles' purposes because Tampa Bay is going to come into that game next week with a bee in their bonnet, and they're going to play differently. That's sort of the way this league works, and that's why I was concerned about New Orleans coming into this game. Everybody's giving them their flowers, and they showed up, and they were snipping their flowers, and they showed up, and they didn't play well.
Hey, Zander, the only thing I'll say about Lane Johnson that concerns me is that I thought he had an illness, but then when they said concussions, and you see him over there throwing up, I've only seen that 4 times in my life where a player gets concussions and he's throwing up on the sidelines. You see, there's levels and grade levels of concussions, 1, 2, and 3. That to me looks like a grade 1 concussion. So that's how they put it through the NFL Players Association with protocol. Neurologists will come in and they'll make a call on that depending on what the protocols they have set up for the player on concussions, and they'll grade that. So length of time could be determined here. Like the Tua stuff is grade 1. Here, when you see a guy like that doing that, and John, I know you've been on many sidelines, but when a guy throws up from a concussion, that's a pretty severe one. And it wasn't anything anybody hit him with. It's when his head hit the turf.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's usually where you get your concussions and your big sprain concussions coming off the turf. And that New Orleans turf is one of the toughest turfs to get away from. A lot of people end up getting hurt on that thing.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to get to our first commercial break here in the show. We'll come back. We'll get into the play of Jalen Hurts today. We're going to talk some of the injuries. Before I do that, I want to hit a couple super chats. I want to remind everybody in the show today, Saquon Barkley went over 125, so we'll be giving away another Saquon Barkley jersey this week to one of our channel members. So become a member today. The link to join is pinned in the chat. A couple super chats here before I get to our break. Jason A-Team checks in. JAKIB is the best. Appreciate you, Jason. Man, what a game today. Goddard and Barkley need my jersey this week. Carter and Davis were awesome together, tag teaming everything. Beyond impressed this week. Office is suspect, but hey, we'll take it. Jason, appreciate the support of the show, man. I agree with all of your takes there. Terry Hayes, I already hit you. ARS Bench says, love seeing Johnny Mack and Dan Sileo after an Eagles W. Defense did work today. Appreciate it, ARS Bench. And one more super chat before we get to our commercial break. Relative Time Work says, Sillsman, Jimmy Johnson crushed Sirianni at halftime. Just coach the game the way it's supposed to be played and you win. Spot on. I'll defer to Jimmy Johnson's wisdom every time. Good super chat there from Relative Time Works. Great stuff, everybody. Thank you all in the chat. Hit that like button. The JAKIB
hang on, Zander. I got to tell John McMullen one thing. John, you're like sitting at a dinner table with my family member. I still feel the guy who hollers the loudest wins the argument. So, hey, I don't know.
Listen, it's a good argument. You guys both made great points.
Good stuff, man.
Great stuff. Let's get to our commercial break.
Zander knows. Zander's got to deal with me. Yeah.
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. I
said Zander's got to deal with me every morning. So. Yeah, I'm in a lag, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
Good.
You're good. You're a couple seconds behind. Let's get to our commercial break. JAKIB post-game show. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned for more great conversation, entertaining debate, and more coming up next.